The most important concept when it comes to developing muscle through resistance training is the intensity of your workouts. To get the most out of strength training, you want to give your muscles more than they can handle, or you want to overload them. Now, though overload may sound like a bad thing, it is probably the one thing that is responsible for your muscle development. The overload principle. On today's Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Okay, as many of you know, I am from South Alabama, born and raised right here along the coast. And the interesting thing about that, the reason I bring that up and talking about the overload principle is that that's what I've always used as an analogy. Living in the South and being on the Long Coast, especially during hurricane season. Now, the reason this is significant is it's pretty easy for anybody to understand the overload principle as it pertains to hurricane season. Now, it's maybe difficult to understand why we fill up our tubs with bath water when a hurricane hits, or why we load up on toilet paper or stockpile food or sandbags or board up windows. Some of that you may understand, some you may not, but I think that the overload principle as it pertains to hurricanes is easy to understand. Let's say you live along the Gulf Coast during hurricane season and you are the first of the three little pigs. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You've got a straw house. Well, most likely a 65-mile-an-hour wind storm, class 1 hurricane, what we like to call a slight rain. A 65-mile-an-hour hurricane would blow that straw house to bits, pretty much blow it over. Now, if you were the second little pig, or even the first little pig for that matter, you came back and you built back, most likely you didn't build out of straw. You'd probably put two and two together and realize you live along the Gulf Coast. There's probably going to be another hurricane. Therefore, you need to build your house a bit stronger, so you build it out of wood. And here comes a Category 2 storm, somewhere up around 100 miles per hour or more. And it blows it over. Well, then most likely you're going to come back and you're going to build a house back, but you're not going to build it out of straw or wood. Of course, you're going to build it back with brick. Now, what's that got to do with resistance training and what I call the overload principle? It's a deceptively easy or simple concept. To make fitness gains, you have to overload the body progressively, lifting heavier weights, run longer, work out more days a week, and so on, in order to provide enough stress that the body will adapt and get stronger, faster, or more powerful. Now, this is pretty easy to understand. Go back to my straw house, then wood house, and brick house. Building a house stronger and stronger to handle higher level storms is basically the earth, or Mother Nature for that matter, telling you, wrong, do it again. That little Pink Floyd song. Wrong, do it again. Wrong, do it again. And that's what's happening. You're building back stronger and stronger to handle the stress of a Category 1, 2, or 3 storm. Well, when you're working out, you're breaking down muscle tissue in order for it to build back stronger. You're telling the body, wrong, do it again. That's why I say it's deceptively simple to understand the overload principle. That's it. I mean, that's pretty easy to understand. Your body's an extremely smart machine. It is the smartest machine you'll ever encounter. It's far smarter than we are. And therefore, it knows how to adapt, change, and survive. And that's what it's doing when you're breaking down muscle tissue. As an exerciser, you may know what the overload principle is, but do you really understand it? I mean, enough to plan the best program. I'm going to run through some of the basics of the overload principle and provide some important tips for progressively and safely overloading your muscles so they will get stronger safely. Breaking it down even further, back to the overload principle. I'll give you the definition of it. That's probably the best way to start. The overload principle it's one of the 7 big laws of fitness and training. Simply put, it says that you have to increase the intensity, duration, type, or time of a workout progressively in order to see adaptations. That adaptations are improvements in endurance, strength, and muscle size. In other words, when a client first starts working out, from having been previously mostly sedentary, they will see some quick gains Now, because if you're going from sedentary to actually starting getting active, you'll see some pretty fast changes. Your body will adapt quickly. But the more fitter you get, the better in shape you get, you will need to increase the intensity of your training to continue to see those gains. That's pretty easy to understand. If you continue lifting the same weights for the same number of sets, reps, week after week, the body will have adjusted to that stress and there will be no more adaptations. And you'll do what I call plateau. And you've heard of plateau before. Well, if you think about it, in the Three Little Pigs story, they plateaued at a brick house. And that's where it ended. I mean, the wolf couldn't blow it down, so they plateaued at a brick house. Now, the reason I say that is that plateau is usually looked at as a bad thing. It's not really. It's also looked at as some kind of foreign concept of, don't know what happens. I'm just not moving anywhere. Well, no, it's pretty simple what's going on. You need to enact a true overload principle, and you need to understand it so that you can make those changes in order to break through the quote-unquote plateau. Now, overloading is necessary to make gains in fitness and athletic performance. However, there are some important issues associated with this principle, both what can happen if you don't do it at all and what can happen if you don't do it right. I was talking about plateaus. The obvious issue with ignoring the overload principle is the failure to make gains. That's what we call a plateau. If you continue to do the same workout or train at the same intensity and frequency, you will make gains only to a certain point. After that, you're not overloading, you're not taxing the muscle, and you hit a plateau with no further improvements or adaptations. Now, a lot of people look at this as some kind of a foreign subject, the foreign idea, the idea of a plateau. And I said plateaus really aren't bad things. Like the Three Little Pigs having a brick house, hey, that was all they needed. That's where they wanted to be. I've got clients that have worked to a certain level and they want to stay there. That's where they want to be. It's what we call your level of wellness. It is a form of a plateau. And so plateaus aren't always bad. But if you get to a point of a plateau and you've made changes in your routine, you keep going up weight on the bench press, or you're adding more repetitions, walking farther, doing lunges, well, what you need to look at is you need to turn around and look at things that you haven't changed, getting a little more drastic, getting a little more in-depth in your change in the stress on the muscle. For instance, let's say that you're having a plateau with a bench press. Let's say you're trying to get tremendous gains. You've got a number you want to hit. You want to bench 315 within a few months or so. And let's say you're getting there pretty strong. You're 225. You've been working out rather well there. You've been upping your repetitions. You've been doing a reverse pyramid on your weights and reps and sets and reps. You're starting to make gains. You're starting to go from 225 to 235 up to 250, and you seem to be moving along. And all of a sudden, you stop somewhere around 275. And you just can't seem to move past it. You've hit a plateau. Well, you may be increasing the weight, changing the weight. In other words, increasing intensity, true. But you could be using the same periodization. You could be using the same sets and reps. You could be using the same exercise. I mean, you're trying to increase on the bench press, but your body is becoming what I like to call immune to that. This is no different than taking medication. If you take aspirin is what I like to use as an example. If you take aspirin, say you take a baby aspirin because your doctor told you you should take a baby aspirin for your heart. Basically, it acts as a mild blood thinner. And if you've had clotting problems or blockage issues, then that can help maintain that a little bit thinner blood, therefore not keep that clotting issue away. But let's say before that, you never took any aspirin. I mean, you never took it unless you had a headache. And all you needed was one because you rarely got headaches. You never took aspirin. Well, now that you've got this baby aspirin on board on a daily basis, your body's gotten used to the analgesic effects of aspirin. You've gotten used to the anti-inflammatory effects, the painkillers, or whatever. You're starting to get used to, even in a small way, just a little bit of baby aspirin. Well, now when you go to take aspirin, it doesn't have quite the same effect. Your body is built up in immunity. It's built up a tolerance, resistance, no different than alcohol. The first time you have a beer or a beer and a half, you may feel a bit tipsy. And if you keep that up, you can take in a six-pack and feel just fine. I have this with coffee drinkers a lot. Coffee drinkers that were proud to tell you that I drink 10, 12 cups a day. I can drink it at night and go right to sleep. Well, they've built up an immunity to the caffeine. Not immunity, they've built up a tolerance of caffeine. And actually, it stays in the body quite a long time, and you don't actually sleep as well, though you think you do. All right, the exercise is the same way. Your body can get used to the damage that's happening and develop a resistance to it. No different than my small town of Mobile that we're used to Category 1 storms. So it's not that they don't do damage. They just don't do anything near the damage because we've built up resistance to it. That's what we call them, rainstorms. Your body does the same thing. And so what happens is you need to drastically change, or more drastically change. Let's put it that way. I don't mean totally erratic, switch gyms and go to, complete from Nautilus to free weights or from machines to free weights. No, nothing that drastic. Go back to our goal of getting 315 on the bench press. Well, maybe you need to start hitting the chest a little different way. Get over to something that the chest has not gotten used to, has not developed an immunity to, or developed some sort of resistance to as far as advancement. And switch over to more of a converging press machine, or switch to a dumbbell fly. Work the chest that way. If you haven't been doing it, it's going to feel harder. That's interesting. When I change clients, then I have one in particular, and every time I change him from one major muscle group exercise, like a bench press, and we go to a converging press or we go to a dumbbell curl, he feels weaker there. In fact, he looks like he's gone back, maybe on a dumbbell, he's gone back 5 pounds less. Well, we haven't done it in a while. He's not used to it. When he was used to it and his body has developed to a resistance to it and was able to manage it, he actually lift more weight. And every time we do that, no matter how many times we switch, oh, wow, I really need to work on that. I'm not doing good on that. No, it's just that your body's not used to it, which is good, which is actually good in your exercise program. Since your body's not used to it, now you can make those adaptations, those gains, those strength gains you're looking for. And you can, in essence, break through that plateau. If you use the overload principle in the wrong way, say by increasing intensity too quickly, you get into a state of overreaching or overtraining. Overreaching now is a short-term problem. It's a decrease in physical performance that takes, days to overcome. Overtraining now is different. That's a more sustained period of excessive training stress. Now, it can take weeks to months to recover from the state. I've seen it take almost years for people to recover because there was such a mental side of that. I'll get to that in a second. But it takes months to recover from the state of decreased performance. I'll give you some signs you should watch for include increased resting heart rate. I mean, you're working out on a regular basis, but your resting heart rate keeps going up. It's a bad sign. It's a sign of overtraining. Increased blood pressure. That stress level going up, and increased blood pressure. Loss of appetite and weight loss that you're not really looking for. Bad problem with overtraining. We see that in a lot of runners. We used to see it in aerobics participants, people that just got addicted to aerobics, literally, because they were going and doing classes, and they would have an endorphin release, and they'd be so happy. They just feel great. I remember years ago, back in 86, 87, seeing an individual finish an aerobics class and stay kind of dancing and moving around in the last move until the next class started and keep going because they were so addicted to the endorphins. But that person ended up with serious joint trouble, and you could see that they were losing weight, but it was getting to a more of an anorexic state, something that you really don't seek. Difficulty sleeping, emotional changes, or mood swings. That's very common. Very common with overtraining is emotional changes or mood swings. Overtraining can make you feel like a failure. And I know it sounds, I'm overtraining. How could you feel like a failure? Because when you're overtraining, you're actually going backwards. And so you're putting all this effort into what you're doing, all this extra work, and you're going backwards, and it will feel like a failure. It's actually people have overtrained themselves out of a fitness program because of feeling that way. Fatigue is an easy one. Of course, you're going to understand fatigue. The body, when you're doing overtraining, the body never gets a chance to rest, recover, and repair. Now, I've said this before. I said this in my podcast on developing muscle, that we don't develop a muscle in the gym. All we're doing when you're doing a workout is you're breaking down muscle tissue. I even went so far as to tell you that no personal trainer is building anything on you, period. And I work with some of the best. A physical therapist is not building anything on you. A PTA, a physical therapist assistant, occupational therapist, they're not building anything. They're tearing down. They're breaking down. They're challenging. When you actually build a repair is when you're resting. That's when the body grabs the necessary calories and the necessary protein to actually build the muscle. And when you're overtraining, you're going to feel fatigue because you're never getting that rest that you need, and you're never actually repairing the muscle that you're working out. This is a very common problem that trainers see a lot. They find it in their most dedicated clients, trying to get them to rest. Because many of them, especially the greatest generation, those individuals and many of their sons and daughters have that strong work ethic. You know some of these individuals. My father was one. I have clients that are this way, and I applaud their efforts. Many of them work all the way to the grave. They don't ever want to feel like they're not working because you work. You work and put effort into things, and that's your entire value is associated with working hard. Well, they bring the same concept to exercise, and they feel that taking any time off, not exercising, makes them feel like they're going backwards. And so what do? After you've broken down a muscle one day, they'll come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday client will do a hard workout with me. And then Tuesday, they'll go do something on their own. Wednesday, they'll come in and tell how they went through this really tough workout the day before, which worked everything out that we did on that Monday. And so in other words, we broke down muscle tissue on Monday, and right when it was going to repair, they went and broke down muscle tissue again. And because they feel like they have to be working. Well, you get fatigue, you get going backwards, and that gets into that emotional changes, mood swings, difficulty sleeping, chronic muscle soreness, and extended recovery times. And overtraining can cause injuries that you never get over. A very dear friend of mine was an aerobics instructor years ago, in fantastic shape. We work out really, really, really hard. Only thing I noticed, and this was before I'd really gotten into my studies and my master's degree and started doing a lot of studying about rehab, but she had gotten into a situation of wearing an air cast, advised by her doctor because she had a stress fracture in her leg. And she wore an air cast, but she wore an air cast and taught aerobics in it. She wore an air cast and she did sprint drills with it. She wore an air cast and she was lifting with it the entire time. In other words, she was not resting to let the stress fracture recover. And she was using the air cast as a panacea, in other words, to basically say, hey, look, I'm doing something about this. And it never got better, mainly because of overtraining. I spent so much time on that because overtraining is a common problem. And overtraining does so much damage. It does a lot of damage to my business because it runs people out of exercise. It makes people scared to do it, because they typically don't know that they were overtraining. Instead, they say, I was doing this exercise and I hurt myself, so that exercise is bad. But overtraining can be very dangerous. Be careful if you notice any of these patterns in yourself or in a friend. You know, if we can help you with that, reach out to us at personaledgefitness.com or Personal Edge Fitness, our Facebook page. Contact me at 251-341-0927 or reach out to me at Garrett@personaledgefitness.com. I would love to help you deal with getting through an overtraining issue, or if you have a friend that's going through it, if I can help you with that, please let me know. Now, there's several ways you can make sure that you're not overloading and not hitting a plateau. Essentially, these strategies all involve increasing some factor of a workout. You can increase 1, 2, or more in a way that makes sense for your goals. Now, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about making gains on that bench press going for 315 and slowly increasing resistance. In other words, adding weight and going up. And when you start to see those gains change, turn, pivot, make another change somewhere else using what we call the FIT principle. I have a podcast on the FIT principle, but fitness, intensity, time, and they've actually added a second T, which is tempo. I'm not a big fan of having tempo added to it because I think that has to do with speed. The tempo is thrown in there, I think, mainly to make sure that people are maintaining correct form. So let's go with that. FIT, F-I-T-T, FIT principle. You want to make sure you make those different changes concerning the factors of the FIT principle. Again, frequency, intensity, time, and tempo. Frequency is the number of times your client works out, or I work out, or you work out, or one of my clients works out. Usually it's measured per week. It can be measured more than that. It can be measured per day, really. I mean, going from doing 1-a-day workouts to 2-a-day workouts. And of course, adding that kind of intensity or adding that kind of overload, you have to be very, very careful. We have people that do 2-a-day workouts, but it's very regimented, as in they're doing cardio and then come back doing resistance, or they're doing resistance, they're working one part of the body, they come back and work another part of the body. But frequency is typically measured per week, like you're doing 3 days a week or 5 days a week or 2 days a week, whatever. That's frequency. Intensity this is how hard you're working out during a training session. For strength training, you can increase intensity by using progressively heavier weights, obviously. And aerobic activities, measuring heart rate is a good way to monitor increasing activity. You can increase the intensity through adding incline on like an elliptical, or if you're running sprints on a flat surface, you can switch to a slight incline and actually increase the intensity that way. Bands. When you're doing resistance bands, you go from a lighter colored resistance band, which is typically a lighter weight. You can go to a darker colored resistance band, which is typically a heavier weight. And of course, that's increasing intensity. And if you're at home and you're not lifting any dumbbells or any resistance band, and you happen to use in soup cans, hey, go from the 12 ounce to the 16 ounce. You'll increase intensity that way. So time. The time spent during a particular exercise like lifting or running can increase progress and overload. Now, there's a couple of different types of time, I would say. And what I mean by that is that, let's say when I do our on-demand videos, we control the intensity with time of light by going from 30 seconds to 40 seconds to 45 seconds to a minute 30 that we're holding or doing an exercise. And that's one way that we increase it. Actually doing a workout longer, working out 15 minutes, then working out for 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, 40 minutes, of course, increasing time that way. And tempo, actually they use the last T as tempo and or type. Not a biggest fan of type of exercise because, varying an exercise from a lunge to a squat, of course, you're still working the glute quad combination there. So that's what they use when they talk about type. Tempo now, the reason I use that one is that controlling the pace of an exercise. And the reason I like using tempo is that so many times people use momentum in their exercise. They're just going too fast. And I always say, you've heard the old adage of slow and controlled movements. I don't really care about slow as much as I care about controlled. I can actually use tempo to increase the intensity on a client. If I have them doing something kind of explosive where they have a lot of momentum taking over, I will slow them down. Now that sort of goes into time because I'm spending a little more time on the muscle, but not exactly. If you take momentum out of there, but you spend the same amount of time in a controlled situation, you can actually take one rep and make it feel like 10 reps. So those are different ways of making those changes for the overload principle in order to attack and grow the muscle. And what we do is we do adaptations a myriad of different ways. We change the types of exercises, we change the reps, we change the sets. We do it on a regular basis just to keep it interesting. Unless we have a client that really, they've plateaued in a happy place. They've hit their level of wellness. Then what we're looking to do is we're looking just to maintain where we are. Don't go backwards. I have a fantastic client that he's my poster child for this particular idea of hitting a level of wellness and staying there. Now, if you watch his workout and you're really into exercise or whatever, to you, it's going to be a very boring workout. But it happens to be a workout that works for him. He's gotten to a certain level. He's maintained that strength level, and he's maintained that strength level for 23 years. And I started with me in his 40s. He's now in his late 60s. And the neat thing about it is we got up to a certain strength level, we got up to a certain fitness and cardiovascular level, and he hasn't gone backwards. He stayed right there. Basically, he didn't do what other people call, not Garrett Williamson and not personalized fitness, but what other people attribute to age. He did not age. In other words, he did not deteriorate and go backwards. I don't think it means that, but that's what a lot of people believe. So I'm pushing that point again, mainly because, hitting your plateau and hitting your level of wellness is not really a bad thing. Now, for aerobic adaptations, for instance, when I have a client who's a runner, I have them work on intensity one day using heart rate or interval training, and then I'll turn around and increase the time with a long, slow run on another day in the same week, mixing it up. Basically what they call cross-training, kind of changing up things just so the body doesn't get used to it. Now, if you're really getting serious about this and you're really trying to make some serious changes, one of the best things you can do to control and be able to see why you're hitting a plateau or why you're not making those changes or whether or not you're overloading properly is to chart it like a training log. Logging in your sessions, tracking your sets, reps, and weights, and watching them over time. See how it changes. See if you're plateauing. See if you've changed the exercise. If you have it there in front of your face, you may or may not remember what you did. But if you write it all down, you can look back, oh my Lord, I've been doing bench press now for 6 weeks. I haven't changed to a converging press machine or a cable fly or a dumbbell fly or even just a simple variation on a push-up. You can actually go back and see. It's a good way to track it and keep up with it. This is very basic information on the overload principle. There's a lot more to it. And get into macrocycles and mesocycles, microcycles. If you're interested in any of that information, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to break some of that down for you. I just want to do a quick, brief overview of what we call the overload principle, how crucial it is, and the fact that it is a foundational idea in fitness. Now remember, if you don't overload the body, you will never see gains in muscle strength, endurance, and size or aerobic fitness. Overstress the body, and you will overtrain, and you'll see a decline in performance or even get injured. Contact us if you need more information about overloading correctly, because we're doing everything we can to help you live your level of wellness.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 888-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.